about the security concepts in the Microsoft Dataverse. So I'm expecting or assuming like you have the basic understanding or the fundamental knowledge of the Microsoft Dataverse, or if you're not, then in the upcoming sessions or in the might be in the previous session you have gotten very high level idea that what the Microsoft Dataverse is. But before getting into the session, I would like to give a fundamental introduction about what is the Microsoft Dataverse, why the Microsoft Dataverse is being widely used across the Microsoft applications, and what is the basic fundamentals, the security concepts of the Microsoft Dataverse. All right. So as you know, like the security concepts or the security is a very wide or the very vast topic in the dynamic CRM and the Dynamic 365. Nowadays, it's a power platform also. So I try to comprise all the topics in a 1 hour session. So I'll try to cover all the things. So without further ado, let's get into the session. A quick introduction about me, about myself. My name is Arpi Srivastav, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm basically from India. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the business application, and I'm working in Capgemini and working as a Power Platform architect. I'm also leading the Dynamics 365 user group of India, and I'm recently been awarded as a the Power Community Ambassador. So I've been speaking, organizing a lot of events in the community since 2018. So if you want to connect with me through my social media channels, I write a lot of interesting stuff related to the Power Platform and the Dynamic 365 on my new website called arpitpowerguide.com. So do check it out, and I upload all my recordings or wonderful the plug and play solutions, some useful tips and tricks related to the Power Platform and the Dynamic 365 on my YouTube channel as well. So you can find me on my on YouTube by name Arbit Dynamics. All right, so you can connect me through my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and my Facebook and Instagram as well. Without further ado, let's get into the session and discuss about the agenda or what we're going to discuss today. So I'm going to discuss about why Microsoft Dataverse. All right. So we before going to discuss about the security concept, I'm going to give a quick overview of what is Microsoft Dataverse, why we use the Microsoft Dataverse, and what is the security in the Microsoft Dataverse. All right. Then I'm going to discuss about the authentication and the authorization, and that how the authentication and the authorization works in the Dataverse. And we have some more additional security concepts about the Dataverse that I'm also going to discuss about that. All right. So why Microsoft Dataverse? So Dataverse is simply it's a database. OK, so that basically empowers the organization to work with any type of data and any type of application and use the data within to gain insights and to drive business actions, right? So Microsoft Database is nothing but a database that you use to store all sort of data that is managing by all the Microsoft applications. OK, now the question is that all the database in this world is going to store the data in the database, right? So what is special about this Microsoft Dataverse, right? Why should I use the Microsoft Dataverse? If you can see here, the Microsoft Dataverse lies here, and you can see like all the data. It's just like a central repository of all the Microsoft application, which is being used to store the data. And on top of that, you can build your application like your Power Apps, Power Automate, your chatbot, and your analytics and reports using Power BI. And you can create your custom apps as well. You can design your AI building capabilities, and you can design your connectors as well, right? So this is all about the Microsoft Dataverse. But why should I use the Microsoft Dataverse? So the reason behind is the data management. So as you know, like today the storage of data is quite easy, but the management of data is quite complex, right? So storage and management two are different things. Management is not an easy one, right? So data is basically is the center of everything. So every organization, every business is depend on the data. So what their business is doing today, what their business is going to do tomorrow, what their business will perform in the future, everything is depend on the data. So the organization, high level managers and everything, they need to have the insights, they need to have the analytics. Based on that, they can predict the data. So there are high demand of data management in all the organization. All right, and business also needs to capture the data, analyze the data, predict the data, and and make the reporting of the data in the more agile way these days. Okay, so what is the problem with data management right now? So the data management problem is that the setting up the data infrastructure. So data infrastructure setting up is it's a quite complex thing. Why it is? Because nowadays if you can see, a lot of application are using different databases. So if I talk about a particular organization, a organization can store all the documents of a customer or the files of the customer in a separate database. Finance related data is in a separate database, and all the customer related, or the case management related stuff in a different database. So customer information is same, but it is scattered through different databases. So what is the problem with that? The problem is that the data is being stored in a different formats. The data is being pulling out from the different devices, different platform. So it's very hard to being a developer to to manage the integration, to manage the deployment, and manage the development of the apps. Right? If my data is distributed among different data sources, it's very hard to design the apps, because I have to increase my deployment time, I have to increase my development time or the integration time. Right? So the management of data is quite complex, because the data is not being stored in a common repository, and it is a different data format. But using the Microsoft Dataverse, it is very easy. Actually, it actually covers all the things, all the overcome, all the issues that we were facing, all the organizations, right? So they actually store all the data in a common repository. We call it as a Microsoft Dataverse, and the speciality is that it actually store the data of different formats. No matter it's a relational data, like the case, opportunity, or your the account, contact, right? Or it's a non-relation data, like the file and images. All sort of data can be stored in a central repository. So that is the advantage. The second is the app development. So now you can imagine, like, if your data is stored in a common repository, it's very easy to design the apps. Right? You don't need to integrate a different data source to pull out the information. Right? You have the common database. You can just pull out the information and design your app. So app development becomes quite easy. Analytics and reporting, it's the same like the app development. You have your data in your common repository. You can design your analytics, your dashboard, or reporting. So it's very good to for the managers or for the higher management. So quickly track the the activities within the organization, and they can simply predict the success of the organization based on that. So analytics and reporting quite easy, because data is being stored in a common repository. Compliance and security, I'm going to discuss about security about more. So I'm not going to discuss about here that why security is important in the Microsoft Dataverse. I'm going to discuss about in deep that what type of security gates and what types of security that Microsoft has provided to secure your data being stored in the Dataverse. All right. The next thing is the availability and the scalability. Dataverse is designed to meet your enterprise level accessibility. OK, and it actually provide you the service level agreement of 99.9% uptime. So you hardly see your dynamic CRM or the server is down, or your data is not available, or a particular region server is down. So that is not possible actually. So that is up to the Microsoft. You don't need to care about that. Availability and the scalability is also being handled by the Microsoft. Backup and restore, the Microsoft provides you the two ways of backup and restore capabilities. Obviously, the backup is two-way, the automatic and the manual. It automatically takes your database backup on the daily basis, but if you want to take it manually or on-demand basis, you can take the backup manually as well. And at any time, if you are deploying any very complex requirement, you want to take that backup manually, you can take it and you can restore your database as well. So these all the capabilities are there in the database, unlike the other database available in the market. That's why we recommend to use the Microsoft Dataverse. All right, let's uh, let's move on to the security part. That what is the Microsoft Dataverse security? There are a lot of securities are there. If you read through the articles on the internet, there are a lot of information about the security, because nowadays we have lot of components. We have the dynamic CRM, we have the Power Platform, we have low code no code apps, we have the Microsoft Teams. So there are a lot of things are there, a lot of components or resources are there. But in this session, I just try to comprise all the security features in this 1 hour. So let's discuss about the security concepts in the Microsoft Dataverse. So it's not about the Microsoft Dataverse, any application in this world. The security is basically made up of two things: authentication and the authorization. All right. The authentication is basically the process where you need to prove your identity, who you are. Authorization is basically the process where you need to tell the application that what you want to access. OK, so authentication is who, and authorization is what you want to access. right? So in the dynamic CRM also, the first thing is that authentication. So you need to, if you want to access the Dynamic 365 application or the Microsoft Dataverse, any application that is built on top of Microsoft Dataverse, you need to prove your identity using Azure AD account. Okay, so that means your user account should be there in the Azure Active Directory. Using that, you can prove your identity. The second thing is that the license, which also part of the security, because you can restrict the user access on a particular application based on the licenses. So this is kind of control gate to allow accessing the application. So a particular user can access a particular application or not. It depends on the licensing as well. All right. Access the environment, act as a security boundary. So I'll discuss about all these individual component in more details, but this is the all major component that plays a key role in the security. So access environment is basically when you get the access on a particular application, you should have the access on the particular environments as well. Then you need to have the resources level access as well, because once you enter in the environment, what resource you can access, then what app you can access, then what data you can access, right? So if I explain the security concept in Microsoft Dataverse in the real-time example, you can take the example of airport. Okay, so once you enter in the airport, you need to prove your identity by showing your passport or maybe any sort of ID proof to enter into the airport. So that ID proof, that the proof that you are giving to the security gate is like a authentication, right? You are proving your identity on the security gate of the airport. Now, once you enter in this airport, the second thing is that the license. License means you have the license, or you purchase a particular application. You are paying for a particular application. So licensing is same like in the airport. You have the tickets of the of your flight. You have purchased a seat to sit on a particular flight, right? So you have the license of that particular seat to sit in a particular airplane. Okay, and another thing is the access environment. So environment is like, when you enter in a particular airport, there is multiple gates are there, right? The security gate 1 where you have to board for the Singapore flight, security gate 2 where you have to board for the Australia flight. So same like that. So you are only allowed to board or enter in a particular gate where your flight is waiting for you, right? So you have the access on a particular gate. So that is called the environment. Now, what resources, what data, or what kind of the services you can access inside the airport, like whether you are allowed to waiting in the VIP lounge, whether you are allowed to sit in the economic class in the flight, or in the or in the business class in the flight. That is actually the authorization, that what sort of authorization you have. All right, so this is a very simple real-time example through which you can imagine that how the authentication and the authorization work in the real time as well. Okay, move on to the security gates. So what type of security depth that the Microsoft provides you if you want to access a particular data in the Microsoft Dataverse, right? So now you can see here in the security gates, like if I am the user and if I just wanted to access the Dynamic 365 Dataverse data, right? So first uh, I need to pass the security gate number 1, that is Azure AD. So my user account should be there in the Azure Active Directory. If my user account is not there, I'll not be able to authenticate myself. I'll not be able to prove my identity, and I'll not be able to access any application. All right. The second thing is the license. Then the third thing is the environment level access. So let's say you have the account, you have the license of the application, but still you will not be able to allow and enter into environment if you have not a proper rights to enter the environment. Okay, then you need to have the environment level access. Then again, once you enter into the environment, what resource you can access, so that security is also there. So for example, we have a lot of resources, like we have the Power Apps, we have the Power Automate. So these are the components of the resources we have in the environment level, right? So that you can also control using the security, that whether you are allowed to create the Canvas app, whether you are allowed to create the Power Automate. So that is the resource level security. Another level of security is the app level security. So for example, we have a lot of apps, model driven apps available, like sales app, customer service, marketing, talent. Now you can provide the app level security as well. So for example, you have the Azure AD account, you have the license, then you enter into the environment, then you have the resource and access, but now you can provide the app level access as well. So you are allowed to access the resources, you are allowed to access the environment, but you don't have access to use the sales application. So that is also possible. So that app level security you can also provide. Then further, within the app, you have a lot of tables, you have records, then you have the forms, then you have the field. So you can imagine like, what granular level of security that Microsoft provides for you, right? It actually provides the field level security as well. It's not only from the table level, it actually provides the table level security, then it also provides the form level security, then it's also provide the field level security as well. So you can hide and show, the sensitive information on a particular field level as well. So these are all the security gates that I'm going to discuss about in my further slides, that how you can provide the security and what is the significance of each security gates in order to access the Microsoft Dataverse. Okay. All right. So first of all, we discuss about the authentication, that how the authentication of the Microsoft Dataverse work and what are the different types of authentications are there. The first type of authentication, which is quite common one that we all are using, is the Azure AD Authentication. So as you know that, if I have to access any of the application, whether it's a Dynamic 365 or maybe, then a Canvas app, Power Automate, any application of under the umbrella of Microsoft 365, if I want to access, then I need to have the Azure AD Authentication. All right, my account should be there in the Azure AD. So the user needs to provide their user ID and password that gets verified in the Azure AD. Azure AD gives the token back to the user. That token will give it to the Dynamic 365 or the Microsoft Dataverse, and then you get the access of that particular application, right? So it's a straightforward way. So Azure Active Directory is the storage of all the identity of all the users in the Microsoft Dataverse. The second type of authentication is the claim-based authentication. So if any organization don't want to use the Azure AD-based authentication, then the second type is the claim-based authentication. In this authentication, the consumer is actually trying to use the Dynamics 365 application. So they actually try to use as an anonymous request, and once they request to get the application access, they will be redirected to the STS server. So STS is nothing but the that it's a server which provides the token services actually. Okay, so it actually provides the token to the user. So for that, the STS servers redirect request to the identity storage, where the identity information of the user or the consumer is being stored. So once the consumer send the request to STS server send the request back to the identity storage. Identity storage will give the response back to the STS servers that the user is authenticated, its identity is proved. Then STS server give the SAML token or maybe any other type of token give back to the consumer. Then using that token, the user can directly access the Dynamics 365 application. So this is the claim-based authentication where your identity is not being is being managed in the third-party application or any identity storage or in from the STS server. All right. The third type of authentication is the OAuth authentication. So OAuth authentication is basically a type of authentication where any external application can access the data of Microsoft Dataverse. Imagine a situation, you are working in a project where you have to create an application, no matter on which platform or which language you are designing that for. For example, you are creating a Java portal or .NET portal or HTML page, and you just want to pull out the information from the Microsoft Dataverse, right? So in that case, it is not necessary that your user. So for example, I'm creating a Java application, okay, and in the Java application, I just want to display the Dynamic 365 data. I just want to perform an operation in the Microsoft Dataverse, right? And in that Java application portal, around 1,000 to 2,000 user log in daily basis, right? So it is not required that all the 1,000 or 2,000 users should be there in the Microsoft Dataverse as well, or in the Azure AD Active Directory as well, right? It is not possible. So how these user can access the Microsoft Dataverse information sitting outside the Microsoft Dataverse? So for that purpose, we have the the OAuth 2.0 authentication. Okay, so OAuth is an authentication protocol basically that allow you to approve one application interacting with another on behalf of other users. Okay, and you don't need to give your username and password to that application. Okay, so for example, I'm just giving a OAuth example. So for example, if you have registered for the Power Community event, so Power Community doesn't ask you to enter your username or password while signing up for the event, right? They ask you to log in either using LinkedIn or the Facebook. Not the Facebook, I think they are using LinkedIn. So they are asking, you can, sign up on the Power Community event using your LinkedIn. So that means you are not giving your user ID password to the Power Community. Power Community is getting, it's verifying your identity from the LinkedIn. So when you provide your consent that you can check my identity through the LinkedIn, the Power Community request to the LinkedIn give response back to the Power Community. Yeah, this is a valid user. Then the Power Community allow you to sign up on the page, right? So in that case, Power Community. So just imagine, just for this Dataverse event, 1000 users has registered, right? For another event, then another 1000 users has registered. Power Communities cannot handle these 1000 to 2000 user identities. They need to have a separate storage to store the username and password of all the users, right? So the best way to use the OAuth authentication, you don't need to care about the username and password. You can just talk to different application where user already identified himself, and they can just get the token from that application, and you can get the access of that particular application. So in the same way, Dynamic 365 also use the OAuth authentication, and here the authentication identity provider is the Azure Active Directory. So let's say you are a consumer or you are designing a .NET application and you just want to have the access in the Dynamic 365, or you just want to get the data from the Dynamic 365, then you just first need to request the Azure AD based on the, so for first of all, you just need to register an application in the Azure Active Directory, so that once you registered an application Azure Directory, it actually gives you the application ID, and it also the client secret key as well. Okay, and by using that application ID and client secret key, you request to Azure AD. Azure AD gives you the token, and based on that token, you get the access in the Dynamic 365, and you can access that application. Okay, so you can just simply can have the bidirectional communication with the Dynamic 365 using OAuth authentication. All right, so this OAuth authentication is basically for the web API that Microsoft Dynamics 365 provides to interact with the external applications. So these all about the authentication. Now discuss about the authorization. Okay, so once the user entered into the application, now what are the different ways to authorize a particular data that is available in the Dataverse, right? So there are different ways. So the first security gate is a license. Okay, so the user needs to have appropriate license in order to use the Microsoft application. Despite of any application, you need to have the Dynamic 365, Power Apps, or SharePoint. You need to have the appropriate license. No matter you have the Active Directory account or not, you first need to have the license to enter into the application. Okay, now user who have the Dynamic 365 license can only get synced in the Microsoft Dataverse environment despite of being exist in the Azure AD. Right. So for example, if you want to create a user in the Dynamic 365, you cannot simply create an Azure Active Directory or in the Office 365 and expect it to sync it into the Dynamic 365. Right. So first is you need to create the account in the Azure Active Directory. OK, and then you need to provide the proper license, whether it's a Dynamic 365 or the Power Apps per app license. So you need to have the appropriate license assigned to that particular user. Then it gets synced back to your user table in the Dynamics. All right. Now, if the license is removed with any reason, so for example, if user is leaving the organization or left the organization, then you don't then they no longer want to access the resources of the Dynamic 365. So you can simply remove the license. So by doing that, user don't get deleted. It actually gets disabled from the instances. OK. Application and interactive users don't require license to access the Microsoft Dataverse data. So that is a very important thing, because sometimes I have personally seen in a lot of projects that people are using the licensed user in order to connect the Dataverse from external applications. So for example, like I earlier in my earlier slide, I told you like I'm designing a .NET application, or if I'm designing any external application on the HTML page, right? I don't need to log in into the Dynamic 365 in order to get the access of the data. I'm just getting the data from outside the CRM. So why I need to have the license, right? So Microsoft actually provided two types of user for that. The first is the application user, and the second one is the interactive user. So if you are using the OAuth authentication, you need to create the application user inside your Microsoft Dataverse in order to get the data from the Dataverse. So for application user and the interactive type of user, you don't need to provide any sort of license, right? Now you can control the resource accessing using license. So that's I already told, like you can access. So for example, in your Dynamic 365 instance, you have a lot of apps. You have the omni channel, you have customer service, you have sales app, and you have a lot of Power Platform components. But you just want to control the access of the resources using the licenses, right? So you can use the license. You can provide the license for a Power Platform and not provide the license for a particular app. Then you can manage the resource access using licenses as well. Okay, now once I get the license, the second authorization point or the security gate is the environment level security. Now, what is the meaning of environment? Okay, so environment is basically, I would say it is a basically group, or you can say it is a container of all the resources. Okay, now in this image, you can simply imagine, like, I have the three containers or the three environments, this environment 1, 2, and 3, and all the environments is basically nothing but the group of resources. So in the environment 1, that is called it as a contour. So USA, it has apps, it has flows, and it has Dataverse. In the same way, in the Canada Contoso environment, I have the same resources, and in the third environment, I have the same resources. So why I need to use the environments? So if I have already access at the tenant level, or if I got the license of the tenant level, why need to provide the environment level access? Because there might be a situation in your project, you need to create the multiple environments based on a requirement. So for example, you want to create your development environment separate from the UAT or the SIT, you can create a different environment. Sometimes what happen is your development activities you want to manage in a different environment, and your training and development training you want to create a separate environment for the training purpose. And for third environment, you just want to have the R&D purpose. You just want to explore some new features of the dynamics and all. So you don't want to intact one environment features to the another, then you just distribute your functionality among the environments, right? So this is a basically environment. So once you have the access at the tenant level, that doesn't mean, so for example, if you have the access of the dynamic 365, you got your account created in Azure Active Directory, and you have the license of dynamic CRM, that doesn't mean you have the access of the environment. Okay, so you need to have the, and if you want to have the environment level access, you need to have the user added in the security group. So we have the concept of security group, that security groups is actually distinguish the user from one environment to another environment. So each environment is associated with the security group. So once you get the access of a dynamic 365 application, unless or until you are not added a particular security group associated with the environment, you will not be having access on that environment. Okay, so that means you can have the access of the Contoso USA environment, but you don't have access to the Canada unless or until you are adding into the security group. Okay, so that by using security group, you can manage the environment level security as well. Now, once you have the environment access as well, now what is the next level of security? The next level of security is the resource level security. All right, your account is there, your license is there, now you have the access of the environment. Now within the environment, you need to have the access to access the resources. Now what are the resources? Could be anything, your Power Automate, your Power Virtual Agent, custom connectors, custom APIs, Canvas app. So these are all the resources, right? So these resources can also be managed using environment roles. So once you have the access in the environment roles play a key role actually to decide whether what I can do or what resources I can access within an environment. Okay, so we have basically two types of environment roles: environment admin and environment maker. Okay, environment admin is basically the user who can do anything in the environment. That means he can do anything in the resources. So resources, they can create the resources, they can delete the resources, they can assign the resources, they can manage the user. So they can do all the sort of admin activities in the environment, but still they don't have the access in the Dataverse data. Okay, so that's why I mentioned like they can't access Dataverse data. Despite of being they are the environment admin, they still don't have access of the Dataverse data. So that is the beauty of the security of the Microsoft, right? Another level of role is the environment maker. So environment maker, as the name is suggesting, it doesn't allow to perform all the admin sort of activities. They can but create all the sort of resources in the environment. So for example, the environment maker can create the Canvas app, they can create the Power Automate, they can create the custom connectors, but they cannot manage the users. That is managed by the environment admin. Okay, but both the users cannot access the Dataverse data. Okay, they need to have the specific role like system administrator. That is, I'm just telling the high privilege role, but they need to have the Dataverse specific role in order to get the data access from the Microsoft Dataverse. Okay, so this is the resource level security. The another level of security that I personally use in few of my projects, so that's why I put it in this slide, is the Azure conditional access. Okay, it's a very vast topic, Azure conditional access, and Microsoft recently announced there are a lot of features inside that as part of Microsoft Ignite. I'm not going to cover in that slide, but there is a very vast topic, Azure conditional access. So in few of my project, I've actually restricted the resources for a particular users based on the Azure conditional access as well. Okay, so for example, I have 5 users, and among these 5 users, they have the license and they have the environment admin access. They have all sort of the roles, but still I want them to restrict to use the Power Apps portal, for example. Okay, or for example, Power Apps. I don't want to use the Power Apps or the portals. So what I can do is I can simply go to the Azure Active Directory. I can simply create a conditional access policy and just add a particular user. If you have an individual user, you can use the user, or if you have the group of user, you can just create a group and just add to the Azure conditional access policy and just put out a filter that and just add all the apps that you want to restrict to access to. Okay, so you can add the Power Apps portal apps, you can add the Canvas apps, sorry, the Power Apps, and you can just add the user in that particular restrictions. So by using that, you can simply restrict a particular group of users or an individual user to access a particular resource. So that is also possible using Azure conditional access. The another level of security is the app level security. Now you have the access of environment, you got the access of resources. Now the app level security come to the play. Okay, so now you can choose that what users see and access from my apps pages. So when you go to the my apps, you get to see list of all the model driven apps available in your organization. So it depends on what type of license you have. So for example, you have the sales, customer service, omni channel. So these sort of apps are there, but if you want to restrict them based on the security role, you get the option to manage role option, right? Just beneath the app label, the app. So you can simply manage that what app can be managed by which role. Okay, so you can have that capabilities as well, that you can tag a particular security role to the particular app level. So that is the app level security. Then once you have the app level security, what is there in the app is the data. So data is one of the major thing that I'm going to discuss about, and because we were just discussing about the Azure AD authentication, then environment access, then resource access, then app level access. Now finally come to the data part. Okay, now Dynamics 365 data or the Microsoft Dataverse data is basically made up of 3 things. The first is the record or the table where we are actually storing the data. The second is the form, and the third one is the field. All right. So Microsoft Dataverse actually provide the 3 level of security. They provide the record level security, they provide the form level security, and they provide the field level security. All right. Let's discuss about first the business unit. So business unit basically is also play a very key role to manage the security in your Microsoft Dataverse. Okay. Now, what is the meaning of business units? As you can, imagine with the name, like business unit is basically come to the picture when your organization is working in a various divisions or various departments. Okay, so there might be the possibility that your organization has a different departments, and in different departments we have the different set of users who is working in individual activities, right? And you just want to restrict them to access the information based on the business unit. So business unit one user or the department user one user cannot access the information on department two users. So this kind of security want to provide. So in the Dynamic 365, the business unit structure is like that. You have the top level root business unit. OK, and then you have the child business units. You can see here there are 3 child business units are there. Then below the child business unit, underneath there are so for example, the child business unit 1 has 3 users. The child business unit 2 has 2 users, and the third has 3 users. All right. Now all these 3 users, the 1, 2, and 3 cannot access the information of user 4 and 5. OK, because the security rules are tagged to the business rules. Sorry, the business units. So that's why the user 1 who is associated with the particular business unit cannot access the information of business 2, and the same with the business unit 3. But that was possible using the teams concept. OK, so the teams is basically the concept where we can have the users of the different business units, right? So if you can see here, like team 2 has the user 2 of business unit 1, and the team 2 user has 4, and which is of the business unit 2. So for example, if the user wants to collaborate with the data of the another business unit, they need to have in the team, right? So this was the concept earlier in the business unit. Now the Microsoft recently announced in the November 2020 21 Ignite that they have actually modernized the business unit. Now there is no longer restriction that the user can only access their own business unit data. So users are no longer restricted to accessing or managing data in their own business unit. They can now access and own records across business unit. So now you can see in this example, like this is the root business unit and there are the child business unit. The user A can access the data of division V and user A can access the data of division V. How it is possible? It is possible using by providing the security role of division V. So if the user has so security roles from different business units can be designed to the user regardless of the business unit the user belongs to. So for that means the user can have the security role of different business unit so that they can access the information of the different business unit. Now this is only possible using a very common field that you already know, like the owning business unit. In the earlier version of the the Microsoft Dataverse, the owning business unit column was made disabled, right? You cannot edit that column. But now you can enable that owning business unit field column and you can just simply change the user in the owning business unit and determines the business unit that owns the record. So that is the latest feature that Microsoft recently introduced. So if you just want to have a look at how this modernized business unit works, how the user can access the information from different business unit, you can just go to the admin page in your environment page. In the feature page, you can just enable the modernized business unit feature first. Once you enable that, it takes time to get enabled in your environment. Then you can start using this modernized business unit feature. All right, so the next level of security is the record level security. So if you are using any Dynamics 365, you are working in a Dynamics 365 project or in the Microsoft Dataverse, you must know about the record level security. So record level security means who can access a particular data, who can access a particular record, or who cannot. So that is being managed by the two things, that is the access level and the second thing is the privileges. Okay, so the record level security is basically two types: access level and privilege. So access level is basically divided into five parts: the global, deep, local, basic, and none. So this actually decide like what level of privilege you want to provide to that particular user on a particular record. So if I talk about the contact table, okay, so on the contact table, what privileges the user can have? So these are the privileges like read, create, write, delete, assign, share, append, and append to. Now read can have the global privilege as well, and read can have the basic privilege as well. Now, what is the difference between this global, deep, local, basic, and none? So the access level basically decide that what sort of label you should have. So in the case of global, you can access all the contact tables data, despite of being it's belongs to any of the users, right? You can access all the contact data available in a particular organization. The deep is basically it is a it we used to call it as a parent-child relationship actually. So in the it's a deep is basically the business unit level. So business unit is basically you can access the information related to your business unit level. Okay, and in the local basically it is the parent. I think deep is the parent child. So in the parent deep basically is a parent child. So in the parent child basically you can access the information of your business unit and all your subsidiary business units as well. Okay, and in the local you can have the access of your business data, unit data only. And the basic you have the access of your own data, so that is created by you only. And none is basically that means you don't have access of any data. Okay, so this is basically the access level and this is the privilege. So based on that you can provide the record level security in the Dynamics 365. The next thing is the form level security. Form level security is basically come to the picture when you want to hide and show the information on a particular form. So sometimes when you have the record level security, but there are few section or group of the information that you want to hide and show from a particular group of user, right? There might be the possibility. So the first thing is that you can hide and show based on the business rules or some JavaScript sort of things, but there is one concept called form level security as well. So you can see in this picture, like, when you create a multiple forms, you can manage the security or hide and show of the form based on the security. So either you want to display it to the everyone, or you want to display it based on the security role. So if I choose to everyone, the form will be displayed to all. If I choose a particular security role, then it will be displayed to to that particular user who has this particular role. All right. So this is the form level security. Then the last one is the field level security. And there might be the situation like where you need to hide a particular field level data. So for example, you are working in a banking project and you are storing some sort of credit card information or some the account number sort of information, and then you want to keep it secret for all the user and just want to give that access to a specific group of user or the people, right? So for that purpose, you can enable the field level security. To enable the field level security, you just need to enable that for a particular field. So for example, if I want to enable the field level security for a credit card number, so I just need to open that field and just need to enable that field security. Once you enable that, you need to provide the access, like who can read it, who can update that, and who can create that. And you can associate a particular user or group that particular field level security. So this is all about the field level security. And at last, there is one more concept of the record sharing. Okay, so that is actually also part of the security, because sometimes it might be the possibility like you want to share a particular record. You are working in a team and you own a particular record that the other user don't have access to, right? But you still want to share that particular record with that user, just maybe from the approval purpose or from the review purpose. So for that purpose, we have the two types of teams available. The first is the owner team and second is the access team. Okay, access team is basically a special type of team that provided by the Microsoft a few years back. That the purpose of the access team is to share the record with the other users. Okay, in the earlier version of the dynamic CRM, we used to use the POA table. That was the major problem to that leads to increase the database capacity. So Microsoft just replaced that POA table concept with the access team. Now you can simply create a access team and can simply, you can see here, I have just created a, the access team and can provide the access that, in this access team, the member that will be added to this particular team will have the assign, share, read, and write capabilities, right? So the access team basically play a very both the teams, the owner teams or the access team, you can simply easily share your business objects, means your data, and collaborate with other user across your business units, right? So the teams basically belongs to one business unit, but it can be include users from other business unit. So the user can be associated with one more or other team. The difference between the owner team and the access team is that the owner team can own the record, right? It can have the members, and it can also inherit the security, what security is provided to the teams as well. But the access team is basically has a different concept. It cannot own a particular record. It is basically used to share the record. Okay, so that is also a very important concept from the security point of view, that we have the record sharing capabilities as well. All right, so apart from this authentication and authorization, we have some sort of additional securities as well that Microsoft actually provides. The first one is the encryption. Okay, so Microsoft basically use the SQL Server transparent data encryption technology to, to perform the real-time encryption of the data, which is very very tight security. So if any of the hacker wants to, encrypt or decrypt your data, they cannot do that. So that is one of the major reason that why Microsoft use the SQL Server transparent data encryption to encrypt the data. Microsoft also encrypt your connections that you are establishing between, the users or your applications, right? So when you access a particular request, your call gets to the particular local data centers, right? So your network or your connection or information that is being passed from your source to destination should also be encrypted. So Microsoft does it for you. And all the public endpoints are secured using industry standard transport layer security TLS, which ensure that protected connections integrity between desktops and data centers. So these are sort of encryption that Microsoft provides on top of all the security features that we discussed here in the previous slide. Multi-factor authentication is one of the key thing. Okay, so to provide an additional level of security for, the sign in, you can enable the multi-factor authentication as well. We know, like, you can use the username and password as well, But the password actually it's not the best way to secure your application. But nowadays if you use the the mobile devices or any other devices, you get to see there are a lot of ways to authenticate yourself. You're using your fingerprints, using your OTP, or using your face unlock. So these kind of biometric authentications is also there. So multi-factor authentication is provide one additional layer of security. But the thing is that if you are using any DevOps pipeline or any other sort of external authentication, you should use the OAuth authentication for that, because multi-factor authentication support that as well. And the last one is the data loss prevention policy. We know that there are lot of connectors we have. There are a lot of low code no code apps we have. So the primary purpose of the data loss prevention policy is to ensure some to create some sort of rules in the place, because when you are creating flows, you are creating power apps, there are a lot of connectors are there. Okay, so DLP policies basically make sure that you are preventing your organization from unintentionally exposing of sensitive information. So that you have the Twitter, you have the Facebook, you have the DocuSign. There are a lot of connectors are there, but you just want to make sure when you are using these connectors inside your Power Apps or inside your Power Automate or any of sort of application, you don't want to compromise with the organization's sensitive information, right? So in the DLP, basically there are the data sources that you are using in your organization marked with two keywords: the business data only or the non-business data only. Okay, so business data only means that means that particular data source has the sensitive information, and no business data allowed. That means it doesn't have any sensitive information, right? So if you are marking your particular the data source or the connector as a business data only, you cannot keep it with the no business data allowed connectors. So for example, like if you are storing a sensitive client data in Dynamics 365 and the SharePoint, okay, so you would assign them obviously as a business data only. Okay, because it is storing the sensitive information for you. Now, while they can place be in the flow together, other no business data allowed source like Microsoft Teams or social connectors such as Twitter won't be allowed in the same flow. So that is sort of security that Microsoft provide, that you cannot use the business data only connectors with the no business data allowed connectors. All right. So these kind of policies you need to enable or you need to configure while using the data connectors or while using the multiple data connectors in your Power Automate or Power Apps. The last one is the Azure conditional access. That's I was discussing about. So there are a lot of business scenarios where you need to control the access of your resources or your organization data using the Azure conditional access. So there are a lot of examples where you can use the Azure conditional access. The first one is the multi-factor authentication for users with administrative roles. So sometimes what our organization wants is, for example, in my organization there are 5 administrative per persons who just want to perform all the administrative sort of activities. But you want that when they log in into the system, only this administration should get the multi-factor authentication enabled. The rest of the user should not get the multi-factor authentication features, right? So this is sort of condition, right? So you want to enable a particular feature for a particular group of users, right? So for that purpose, you can use the Azure conditional access. Sometimes it might be the requirement that Microsoft, so for example, like your organization has identified that a particular device is not it's not a good to store the sensitive information, or particular location is a particular location is blocked in your organization, and if any of the user try to access your application from that blocked location, they should not be able to access that application, right? So you can simply put the condition in the Azure conditional access policy based on the devices, based on the locations, based on the IP addresses. So these sort of all the conditional based access you can configure using conditional access policies. Okay, so this is also play a very key role when you are working in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform application, and you are just finding it you are finding it that your data is being compromised in a particular location or in a particular device. So you can simply block that using Azure conditional access. All right, so that's all from my side, that I try to comprise all the things related to the security. Apology for not being demonstrated anything, because I'll try to cover the demonstration part in my upcoming sessions, because I had a lot of things to cover, and if I use any sort of demo, then I could not be able to cover all the stuff that I presented today. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you. Over to you, Raj.
Thank you so much again, Arpit. Okay, there was a lot to be covered there from the security model. You did cover a lot of ground, I have to admit, Arpit. Let's have a quick browse at some of the questions here. So Schneider is asking, Rebecca's asking, would I need to use organization roles to restrict the web API call in order to restrict access to the data via web API in particular? You will need to look towards using combination of business units. So I think that question is in relation to how do you you talked Arpit, you talked about how you would restrict access using obviously security roles and Active Directory. So in the scenario of web API, when a web API user, authenticated user, is accessing externally the Dataverse, what security principles would you need to apply to restrict their access? That's fundamentally what they're asking there, Arpit. So in short, hello Arpit, I think you're still on mute. But in short, guys, the answer is security roles. The user, authenticated user, the app user that you set up inside the Dataverse needs to be granted a security role. Hi there, Arpit.
Yes, yes, yes. So you already answered my question. Sorry, answered what I was talking about. So in case of OAuth authentication, you need to create the application user, right, in the Dynamic 365. So just make sure, because sometimes what we give is we just provide the system administrator and the customizer role by default to that application user, but they actually want to access only limited information. So just make sure that you are providing only limited security role, probably the basic user, or maybe if you are creating any custom role that you want to grant only for the few tables, so that you can control using security roles. Yeah.
Great. So there is one other concept that I think we should entertain, and it's around record ownership and teams and security access. Now, that's obviously out the scope of this session, but I'm going to try and cover that ground in the next 5 minutes whilst we wait for our next session, which is by Akhilesh Dubey, who is from Singapore, who will be explaining the session in relation to the financial services accelerator for the Dataverse. So there is a financial services solution for the Power Platform, which Akhilesh will be doing a deep dive on. So we're just waiting for him to join us. Unless you've already joined us, Akhilesh, if you have, please send a message in the chat to confirm that you have joined. In the meantime, I would like to open up the discussion around further security considerations. Arpit, I just want to thank you again, because I know it's a busy day for you. So I'm happy to, oh, there we go. Akhilesh has joined us. So I just want to thank you, Arpit, for that great session. And I will cover a bit around security. So in short, guys, what I'm talking about is something that both myself and Arpit have been heavily involved in the financial services sector. And it really links really great to the next session, actually, Akhilesh. So basically, when you're building a security model in the Dataverse, is building that level of granularity across different departments, locking down access to records where one department user can access a record, can perform updates on a record, whereas another department user cannot. How do you do that? Okay, so that's something that's getting into the more advanced side of the security model, and I'm happy to have a 5-minute discussion on that now, so that we're all well educated on that. So essentially, guys, what it boils down to is how we leverage the teams. So one of the things that Arpit showed was, in addition to the business units, there are teams that you can set up. And so those teams can be assigned security roles. And so any user who's assigned to that given team inherits that security role. Now, let's take it further. So we understand that. That's great. Okay, so rather than having to assign a security role manually to a user, you can assign it to a team and it inherits that security role. Now, there's something else that you need to consider here. It all boils down to record ownership, and Arpit knows very much about this. So essentially, what it boils down to is the fact that every record has an owner. Okay, so the record can be the person who created the record, or it can be a team even, right? So a record can even an owner of a record can be a team, it can be a business unit, it can be a person. And this is a very important concept that's often missed out of security modeling, and it will hit you hard if you haven't considered it when you've got complex security requirements, especially when you need to lock down security roles across departments. Because you have a security role, it gives you access to a specific object. So every time you define a security role, it's defining whether you have read access to a given contact, account, activity, and the same applies to update, delete, and so on and so forth. But when you want to restrict the levels of access based on the relationship the person has with that given record, okay, based on the membership that they have in terms of their department structures, there's an extra level of consideration you do need to make. And that's to do with how you set up the ownership of all those records. And the way you get around that is by setting the ownership to a team. And once the team is an owner of that given record, those members of that team who have the security permissions against that team will now inherit those privileges to that given record. So basically they're acting as the owner of the record now. So now they can do things like, if you're setting the security permission to say user level, okay, then essentially what that means is only the team, members of that team now have those permissions on that record, okay? So feel free to get in touch, ask your questions in the chat. I've seen this happen a lot in especially in financial services, and that's why I thought I'd mention it before we introduce our next speaker, Akhilesh from Microsoft, who will be doing a deep dive in the financial services sector. Arpit, do you have any final comments you'd like to make?
No, Ras, I'm good. If anyone is having any, requirements or if any concern, they can just connect me on my social media channels. I can just give them reply if still they have any concern about that.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, thank you once again, Arpit. Arpit, we also have a hackathon, don't we, next month?
Yep.
We have a hackathon as well, so check it out on the event page. We've got lots of things happening next month. So once again, thank you, Arpit, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Now